Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Monday everybody. This week China's top politicians, leaders and policy makers are convening in Beijing for the annual National People's Congress, where, among other policy announcements, the nation's economic growth target and fiscal budget should be unveiled. We will be covering the outcomes of this national meeting later this week. Last week, news about the only bus company in Shangqiu, a city in China's central Henan province, almost having to suspend all services because it had run out of money, was trending on the Chinese internet. Now, this is an anecdotal case example. It does not necessarily represent the situation across the country, obviously, but it is yet another example, nonetheless, of a wider story which we have been following closely for some time on China Update, namely the growing fiscal pressure on local governments. Last Thursday, the Shangqiu Bus Company, which services a city of 7.7 million people and is backed by the state, announced that it will halt services from the 1st of March, as heavy losses meant it did not have the money to pay drivers or even vehicle insurance costs. Indeed, local media reported last week that staff had not been paid in 5 months. Interestingly, in the announcement, the company said a major reason for the lack of funds was that the city's government had not paid its fiscal subsidies. Within a few hours of the announcement, the notice was taken down and the company issued an apology, stating that the bus services for the city would be operating as usual, suggesting that local policymakers scrambled to ensure the necessary funds were available and that the necessary heads would roll. Indeed, by late afternoon, the local government in their own announcement expressed it, quote, has been subsidizing the company as agreed, end quote. News of the bus flip-flop blew up on social media, attracting over 100 million views on Weibo within 24 hours. As I just said, what is interesting about this relatively unimportant episode in a lower-tier city is that it's symbolic of a larger policy challenge that many other local governments are facing: increased pressures through deficits and rising debt, and a fiscal system in need of reform. Local governments have been witnessing an explosion of debt in recent years, a situation which was exacerbated by COVID and Beijing's policy response to it. According to Hong Kong-based investment group CLSA Limited estimates, local government debt has ballooned to 66% of China's gross domestic product from less than 30% in 2012. We also remember last week, Chinese financial media outlet Caixin reported that hidden local debt is likely in the trillions of dollars. Before the pandemic, regional authorities got roughly 40% of their income from local taxes, 30% from land use sales, and 30% from central government transfers. Last year, land use sales plunged 23%, and the market will likely never return to the pre-housing crisis levels. At the same time, total expenditure for local governments rose 6% in 2022. China's budget deficit jumped to a record $1.3 trillion last year, and that was mainly driven by the declining fiscal health at the local level. Rising deficits means rising debt, and there are signs that in many localities, especially poorer ones with vulnerable economies, the debt is already dangerously unsustainable. Again, according to Hong Kong-based CLSA Limited, in 2022, local governments already spent 10.8% of their revenue on interest payments alone. And we have already explored the red flags coming from local government financing vehicles borrowing in previous videos. So let's go back to this most recent case example, the bus company in Shangqiu. Shangqiu reported a 31.8 billion yuan, $4.6 billion deficit on its main budget late last year, with the city seeing deficits in previous years too. Now, this hasn't stopped the government from spending on infrastructure projects, however, with local media reporting that the city has over 100 public projects funded through bonds planned for this year alone. Bloomberg's Hong Kong team reports today that Shangqiu isn't the only city experiencing these issues either. Hegang City in Heilongjiang almost lost centralized heating in the freezing temperature of January after a local heating company said that it would stop services due to a lack of subsidies, forcing the local government itself in dire financial straits to step in. Next up, the technology war and corporate America's pessimistic China outlook. Hey guys, if you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. It's a huge help. One of the best ways to help the channel grow too is to share this with anyone who is interested in China or following this sort of analysis. And as always, anyone who can go that extra mile and help keep China Update sustainable, financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Over the weekend, Taiwan's foreign ministry said that the so-called Fab 4 semiconductor alliance between Taiwan, the United States, Japan, and South Korea held its first video meeting of senior officials earlier in February. The subject for discussion was supply chain resilience. Quote, "The focus of the discussions of the participating quartet at the meeting was mainly on how to maintain the resilience of the semiconductor supply chain and explore the possible future cooperation directions of all parties. As an important member of the Indo-Pacific region, our country also plays a key role in the global semiconductor industry and has deep economic and trade relations with countries in the region." End quote. This is just one more aspect of an escalating technology war and decoupling between the US and China, where Washington is hoping to choke Beijing of the technology it needs to effectively compete in the space. Commentators are still arguing over whether this is a viable strategy for Washington over the long term, however. Semiconductors is an especially important front in this war. We all know that these chips are used in everything from smartphones to fighter jets. Semiconductor supply chains are also relevant in the domestic politics of several key countries, and leaders know this. For example, Taiwan's Tsai Ing-wen, when speaking to an American audience last year, called Taiwan's semiconductor supply, quote, "democracy chips." End quote. The United States first convened the Chip 4 or Fab 4 working group late last year in September to discuss how to strengthen the semiconductor supply chain. This announcement over the weekend confirms that there have now been high-level talks at the senior official level. The Chip 4 nations boast the world's largest contract chip maker, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co. in Taiwan, memory chip giant Samsung Electronics in South Korea, as well as key suppliers, designers, and customers with Japanese and American firms. And finally, for today's video, today, Monday, the American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham, in South China, published a special report on the state of business in China. The survey found that, unsurprisingly, the deteriorating US-China relationship is having, quote, "an increasingly negative impact on businesses in China," end quote, with over 90% of firms operating in China surveyed saying that the US-China trade dispute is very likely or quite likely to expand this year. The survey of 210 firms was conducted in December as China was abandoning its zero-COVID policy and beginning to open up. The report said that due to market uncertainty and investment risks, most foreign firms surveyed plan to slow down business expansion in China this year. China still remains the top destination for planned global investment among 40% of the participating companies, however, though this is a 5-year low. In 2022, around 26% of firms surveyed chose to shift some investment away from China to other countries, with the US being the second most popular destination for this reallocated investment, and the most popular spot being Vietnam. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great day wherever you are, and I will see you all tomorrow.